Some viewers may find the following video disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised.
Welcome back to the channel, continuing with our series where I am having conversations with some of my favorite friends / advisors, people that I work with. I have probably one of my longest, most respected colleagues of who I've worked with in Seattle, Jessica Hickey. She's agreed to indulge me with a little bit of her very valuable time to talk through some things that we were discussing probably a week and a half ago around mindset and how companies are making the adjustment given the current situation. And a couple of things she was talking about actually started to blow my mind, because I think on the peripheral, I got a bit of an understanding about it, but Jessica's expertise really is systems. And so the way she started to lay it out for me, I'm like, wait. Let's have this conversation on camera so that other people can benefit. So to the viewer who's watching this, this is not us being polished. This is not stage Jess or stage Chris. This is us just having a conversation and allowing you to sit in. So welcome. Now, to give you a little bit of background on Jessica, and I'll have her talk a little bit about her company just to give you context. I met Jessica probably someone that the way that her mind works and her ability to go into a chaotic situation and bring order to it is something that I hold in awe and I well respect. I'm normally a person that introduces chaos into systems. And so when I go into a client that is missing fundamental systems in how they manage people, how they report, how they assess even procurement, I normally will call Jessica right away and ask her to have a conversation with the client, and she will go in and sort things out so that I have a foundation to build on top of. So without further ado, Jessica, thanks for coming on.
Thanks, Chris. Welcome to 1029 headquarters with my headphones and fancy gear.
I wasn't sure if you would be DJing when I saw that headset, and so in case you got the turntables, we might have a music interlude just to break things up. But before we kind of get into these 3 points that you started to blow my mind with, because I eat this stuff up, maybe just give people a little bit of background on you and then how 1029 came to be.
Well, 1029 is an operations management consultancy that came out of my background in engineering and construction management, program management, portfolio management. And really, the engineer gave me a systems head, and the program project management gave me the business formation. When you run a project, you form a team, you have a budget, you have a board, you develop a product. In my case, it was a building. And then you turn it over to the ownership or the clients, and then you disband the company and you form another one and you go on and do a project. And out of that just came thinking about, okay, how do we need to do this? What do we need to think about while we're going after it? How do we report it out? How do we form the team? How do we make sure they're all working together well? I evolved that into working as a COO of a professional services firm and brought all of their administrative operations together because they were reporting out to different people. Nobody could define what their value was. They couldn't define their own value. And the company actually had itself in an administrative hiring issue, so that every time they needed to do something, instead of being really effective at it, they hired somebody else. So that really affected their bottom line because they couldn't bill those people to clients. And that's how professional services work.
Well, and you know what's interesting, I remember us talking a long time ago, and I've always thought of the importance of fundamentals, right, and foundation. And I remember a friend of mine who used to build apartment buildings. You know, it would take 11 months to build a foundation, right? So they dig out the hole and put the garage in. And I'm like, how come it takes so long to do that first part? And then once that foundation's in place, it seems like they put up a floor a day. I mean, I'm sure that's not right, but you know what I mean? All of a sudden it goes up. And he said, without the right foundation, you can't go high. And so I think what I respect most about you is, and you can disagree with me on this, it seems to me that about 90% of businesses that are operating have failed to put in the time to put the foundation in place. And so as it gets bigger and bigger, it's like fat man on skinny legs, and it starts to tip. And those systems that weren't a big deal with 10 people are a huge deal with 100 people. And I'm thinking of the sway of a building. The higher it goes up, the more of the sway. In your experience, how many businesses actually have the foundation in place by the time you meet them for them to build big?
Probably about 10%. And if you think about it, what I've seen is that a lot of times people have started businesses, and I work with all different sizes, but in the small to medium, maybe up to about $10 million, that those people, started the business, kept running, just kind of built the plane while they were taking off, and might have forgotten one of the wheels in the landing gear. And so, they're moving really fast, they're not thinking about it, and then all of a sudden they're looking around saying, oh, I need to land this, but I only got one wheel. Or I forgot to put the other way, the tail stabilizer on. There's a lot of aviation metaphors, but very few people spend time, leaders spend time working in the business, but they forget to work on it. So they're not checking their foundations either. It's like This Old House. If you go back to This Old House, and they'll go along, and Bob Vila would say, so I think the rocks in this foundation probably need to be replaced with some bricks.
What is so challenging, isn't it, is that even companies that we've worked on together, is you will have a company that is growing, but then you start to have a look and you're like, do you guys have this? Or can I look at this? We don't have that. Can you look at this? And I think a lot of us make an assumption that when a company hits $1 million, it probably has this in place. When it hits $10 million, it probably has this in place. And when it has 50 million. And I've always said it's much harder to renovate a company than to build a company. Because to your point, right, if you build the airplane blueprint and I need the tail stabilizer and I need to have another engine, I need 2 wheels. But when you're going in and trying to put that wheel on in midair, it's always a bit more challenging. And it seems because it's hard, the owner pushes out doing that.
There are also places in businesses I found. So if you think about small businesses, if you go from 1 to 5 million, at 5 million, there's a pivot point for businesses where the systems and processes and everything that worked for you from 1 to 5 will break. Something's going to break. So you have to relook at it. And so what it's saying is you just have had a hole put in your foundation. I don't know where the next pivot point is, probably 10, 15 million, but there are certain points in revenue size that you really need to go back and say, what's going to break, won't handle this, what of our foundation might crumble or need to be changed. And then if you're expanding into other markets, you're just building another foundation somewhere else. So how do you take the best of what you have today out into where you're going tomorrow?
Well, see, that's kind of the planning too, isn't it? Is a lot of people don't invest in an annual plan or a strategic plan. And so it's like building a house, knowing you're going to have a big family, but you're building it for 2, not thinking about where on the site are we going to have kids' bedrooms and a pool. And then immediately they're like, we have to try to break our model and build the next model, rather than planning for the future, going, this is what our company looks like at $500,000. This is what it looks like at 5 million. This is what it looks like at 25 million. And I think a lot of people are shocked by their success, and then they're so scared it's going to end, they don't invest time. You know what I mean? So busy with the eye on the ball, eyes off the ball.
That's a little bit of a paradox. Eyes on the ball, can't pay attention to the ball. Right. Eyes on the ball, can't pay attention to the ball. And a lot of people, you have to remember that company leaders are not always the best at the systems. They're not very, systems aren't really interesting. They sustain. Systems are like wallpaper.
You're such a liar. You are a total systems nerd. It's like me saying, oh, foie gras really isn't that good and it's not super nutritious. I love you saying, oh, systems aren't. You are the nerdiest person I know about systems. Just own that.
Well, I am a systems nerd. I own that. Not everybody is. And the reaction I get from a lot of people are, well, I'm glad you like that, because I think it's awful.
Going to that point around planning. And so a lot of people are planning by fire now. They're coming up with plans. Again, not what we would suggest, but what's necessary right now is, business got shut down. So what do we do? You were talking about the chocolate company that you visited this weekend, that, they changed maybe walk-in traffic to having a walk-by or a drive-by kind of a booth. So companies are kind of, they're drowning. And so they're just trying to keep kind of going. But aside from having an annual plan, what I love that we talked about last week is you were talking kind of about the mindset and the discipline that's required now to not only kind of keep your head above water, but actually to get yourself sorted out. And so one of the topics that you brought up that I hadn't heard about was the Stockdale paradox. And so can you kind of give your insight on that? Because I was eating that up big time when you were talking about it.
Yeah, well, a lot of this, so I had an opportunity to see some videos by Jim Collins, who wrote Good to Great. And the other one whose name is escaping me at the moment. And Jim Stockdale was a prisoner of war in Vietnam for 8 years. And Jim Collins knew him. Jim Stockdale wrote a book in Love and War and a bunch of other books. But he really focused on the fact that he had to stay in the mindset, and we know mindset's everything. If you think it's bad, it'll be bad. If you think it's good, it'll be good. And that's what meditation and mindfulness are all about. But the Stockdale paradox is really about staying focused and being, unwavering faith that you can and will prevail, no matter what difficulties, regardless of the difficulties, while confronting those difficulties head on. And so whatever those might be. And the brutal facts that Jim Stockdale had to deal with was that, one, at any point in time, his captors could come in and torture him. So he dealt with that stress all the time. But he absolutely kept faith that they would get out. He didn't know when, and it was 8 years. But think about the optimists in the group who said, we're going to be out by Christmas. And Christmas would come and go. Yeah.
So he was imprisoned for 8 years?
He was a prisoner of war in Vietnam.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, and all of the stuff that you see with the bamboo stakes and the holes and the torture chambers and all that good stuff. So he was saying, yeah, I have this, I'm trapped, I can't get out, I could be tortured at any time, they're starving us, whatever was going on for him. And he said, we are going to get out. I have faith that we will get out. The optimists had their hearts broken every Christmas that said, we're going to get out, we're going to get out. They would not confront those facts of the reality was that we don't know, but we will stay optimistic that we will get out. And so, if you think about that, and what Jim Collins says, that if you don't confront the difficulties head on, they will confront you. And the pandemic is a really good example of being confronted by stuff that, the worst thing, my business is gone. I mean, it's how do you confront that and deal with it? And then, you have to embrace the idea that not only will you survive, because survival is a step. In all the stuff we're talking about today, survival is a step, absolutely, but it's not the end. The end is victory. The end is victory. We get released. We get out. We will prevail. We'll get out. We're going to survive this. And we will survive, but we will also get out and we will live our lives.
Well, my dad used to have a saying, and I remember having rough times back when I started Think Tank, which was the company before GoCO. And I remember I would, I'd blow a proposal, or I'd be running down in cash, right? And I'd be watching that bank account, which I'm sure a lot of people are doing right now. Every month it would be coming down and I would be freaking out, right? And I remember my dad said, when you get scared, get busy, because when you get busy, you don't have time to be scared. And so I found that even with clients now that might be a little nervous, right? Some clients have lost some pretty major accounts. I'm like, what we do is double down. If you were doing an hour of calls before, you're going to do 2 now. If you were reaching out to 3 champions a week, now you're going to reach out to 6. Busy yourself with work that will move you to the goal. Don't busy yourself with worry, right? Worry is negative prayer. I remember seeing that on a bumper sticker before and thinking that's brilliant, right? Because you're just tormenting yourself on what could happen. And by investing that time, you're absolutely not doing the things that will actually shift the course.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so let me move you. Okay, so kind of in line with that, you had brought up the productive paranoia, which kind of plays a little bit of a relational game to that. And so explain that a little bit, because I like that one too.
So if you're confronting the brutal facts of your reality, one of the things you can do is, you can be paranoid. And the whole thing comes from when Winston Churchill was looking at Germany, who was going to invade France, and he basically said, what happens if France falls? And he had promised to help France. So he was confronting how bad it could get, but asking a productive question of his advisors and his military folks: what can we do if France falls to protect ourselves? What do we need to do today to protect ourselves? And what do we need to hold back in the aid to France so that we are going to be okay, so that we can defend this island? And he was told that he needed to keep 25 squadrons active and alive in case France fell. Well, we all know that France fell and Germany headed across the channel to come get him. And he had his 25 squadrons and they engaged in what we know as the Battle of Britain. And they kept Germany at bay until the US could show up. This was when he delivered his victory speech when he held up the V, because it wasn't, again, survival was a step, but victory was what he was after. So you confront the reality, we're in trouble if France falls. What do we need to do so that we can be victorious? Survival is a step, but what do we need to do so that we can be victorious?
When coming out of it, right? Like, and that's the thing is, I find this, and I wonder if you do, an abnormal amount of my clients are innovating right now, right? And so like I have a really well-established law firm in the prairies that is really kind of like a paper firm, you know what I mean? They go in and they keep files and they do a shredding party every year, right? But like a highly respected legal practice. And for the first time in, like, I don't know how many years the firm is, I'm going to say it's probably a 40 or 50-year-old firm, they figured out how to remote connect into the office to access files from home. And so, a lot of us who have been using Dropbox and Google Drive and all of that for a long time, that doesn't seem like that big of a deal. But, a firm that was doing really well with their model was forced to quickly pivot. To your point, nobody was sick. And so they were still coming into the office, right, and being mindful, but they thought if one person gets sick, everyone has to go home. So rather than waiting for that to happen, let's figure out the technology. And in 2 days, they were able to remotely access all their files. And so I think the gift in this is a forced period of innovation for those that want to survive, and stuff that we've been putting off. You now have a bit of time to do it, but especially like given you're in my travel, right? How many friggin' air miles we get every year, but having the time at home, don't let it go to waste. I mean, there's an opportunity to come out of this as a stronger company than you went in.
Well, do remember too that the attorney is a really good example. Mindset of a lot of attorneys is they like to have files piled because it makes them feel like they're doing something. Right. And so to switch to a digital mindset is huge for those that like to work in paper. So that's enormously innovating. And you know what? You can go back to paper files if you want, but you know that you have, so this is another opportunity to be more flexible. So the innovation isn't just a new line of revenue or a new, business model. It's having the choice to do things more effectively. And that's what I look at is when I'm looking at systems, sure, you can have paper, you can go back to paper, but you also have the opportunity to work from wherever you want to be and still do really good work and still do the law work that you want to focus on. And it broadens the choice. And so many people have been, we're so paper oriented. We can't do anything. Oh, wait. Oh, server. Oh, I can access it from anywhere. Hey, not just survive.
One, think of it as an evolution. This is what I've been saying. Is don't think of this as we're getting timed out. We're not going back to what it was in January. Like that doesn't exist anymore. So don't be attached to it. It's like people who go, let me tell you, high school was the best time of my life. Then your life didn't go very well. Because if the best isn't ahead of you, if you're thinking back to your football career as a junior varsity, you've made some fundamental errors. And for people who go, well, we just need to get back to January, you got to burn the boats. Like we're not going back. We are only moving forward. And what's the new forward? It's either going to scare the shite out of you or it's going to be exciting. And for me, like I'm excited on what's to come.
Well, that, the third piece that we were talking about, the fanatic discipline, this is where this comes in because you're talking about innovating and doing all that kind of stuff. And people are like, oh my God, I'm just worn out. I'm just worn out. And what they do, and if you'll pardon me, going into the fanatic discipline is the big thing is the more out of control things are, the more disciplined you have to be, more self-discipline it takes. And that's a hard one to grasp because the other thing I heard is find something you can't control and control the heck out of it, right? If if the only thing you can control is the time you feed your dog during the day, then control the heck out of it. Be ready, have everything ready, whatever it takes. But this was, this comes, Jim Collins was relating that this fanatic discipline comes out of the race to the South Pole. There was, I think it was Norway and England, and the guy Amundsen from Norway made it out to the South Pole and back with everybody intact, and Scott made it out there but never came back.
Right.
And what Amundsen did is he said every day 20 miles, and he did it through what Collins refers to as creative empirical creativity. Okay, how far can we reasonably go? Okay, let's 10. Well, that's not far enough to get towards our goal, and 30 will exhaust us in bad weather. So 20 seems about right. So it's like fire bullets and then fire cannonballs. How far will the bullet go? Now how far will the cannonball go? And you test it and you apply the right results. And then you do your 20-mile march, and you say 20 miles a day, no matter the conditions. If it's great, 20 miles. If it's bad, 20 miles.
Can you do more than 20 miles?
No, you stay disciplined. It's fanatic discipline, 20 miles. This is what we do. And if it's 20 miles in good weather, it means we're rested. If it's 20 miles in bad weather, it means we were rested yesterday from the good weather, so we can do 20 miles and not exhaust ourselves in the bad weather. What Scott did is he went crazy out. He went in good weather, exhausted himself, and then holed up for the bad. And weather in South Pole is completely not controllable. So who knows how many bad days they had as opposed to good. But in that 20-mile, that fanatic discipline, 20 miles, no more, no less, every day, you're moving towards your goal. You made steady progress. Again, survival was not the goal. The prevail was get out there and get back with everyone intact. So it goes back to the productive paranoia. What does prevail look like? What does victory look like to you? And then what is your own 20-mile march? If it's 2 hours a day of calls instead of 1, it's 2 hours a day every day. No more, no less. When you're done with your 2 hours, you're done with your 2 hours, if that's what it is.
And so how do people come up with what their 20-mile march should be? People who have not normally or don't default to being planners, what kind of questions do they need to ask themselves? Is it thinking about what they want the outcome to be and then breaking it into smaller steps?
Exactly. The hardest piece is, what does victory mean to you today at this time? Victory means, for me, taking my own business, victory means that nobody loses sight of me. I may not do any work for 4 or 5 months, but nobody loses sight of me. So my 20-mile march in some ways is making sure that I get ops thoughts out every Friday.
At 10:29.
At 10:29. It might be, it's how many touches a day to whom I do. It might be the 1 to 3 hours of cold calls or outreach. For a construction company, are you going to have, if prevail means that you're going to have all 100 of your field employees and all 50 of your office people ready to roll on, I don't know, July 15th, let's say, then what do you have to do to be there? You have to think about, okay, so we have to do these things this week, next week, and continually always doing the same things. We're going to be setting up systems. We're going to be making sure that everybody's okay. We're going to be setting up PPE for our PPE methods for our job sites. How do we keep people distanced? Because right now we can go back to work in Washington State. People can go back to work, but there's some very strict guidelines. How do we stay marching on those guidelines every day?
Everything that you've taught me about systems, I then got an additional viewpoint from James Clear's book, Atomic Habits. And kind of to your point, because he's so systems focused, right? And you know how I feel about taking the emotion out of business, right? Or what you say, stoicism, right? And so I wrote down these 3 to kind of, I know that you know these, but to share with people that are here, because I think they dovetail beautifully with what you said. First thing you said is, you do not rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. Those systems, if they're not in place, are never going to allow you the trajectory to get to where you want to go. The second one is, you should be far more concerned with your current trajectory than with your current results. So you've heard me say, like, look at the trend, forget about what the monthly is. Are we trending up or are we trending down? And then the last one is, when you fall in love with the process rather than the product, you don't have to wait to give yourself permission to be happy. You can be satisfied anytime your system is running. I've read that book now twice. When I knew we were going to do this call, I'm like, don't those kind of encompass the mindset that people require right now?
Absolutely. So a couple of, there's micro and macro views. So one of the things to think about in the case of revenue, I was having a conversation with in a group, it's a peer advisory group with one of the members, and he was saying, okay, I have set it up so that my firm is going to bill this much money per month. And everyone in the room looked at him and said, that's not enough. You got lots of spare capacity. Understand that if you set that goal, then your people will only work to that. He had a whole lot more horsepower. Now, there's a lot of things that he needed to do to get them to a higher goal. But what we said is, so his 20-mile march was this quarter, this much per month, next quarter, this much per month, next quarter, this much per month, until you reach the reasonable goal. And what he was doing is saying, okay, well, that's the break-even revenue that I need. His people were going to slow down, and that's to do that, because that's not taking 40 hours a week of their time or 60 hours.
Mm-hmm.
The other one is, if you think about the stock market, what looks like a smooth curve in any direction is actually like this.
Right.
Up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down. And you could drive yourself crazy if you looked at all the ups and downs. So coming out just slightly from that is, yeah, as long as the trajectory is upward, if you're doing this a little bit, that's okay. Boats do that, and they still get to where they're going, because the water's coming at them. So it's that whole, it is the mindset, not just survival, prevail. From an operations point of view, the sky's the limit here for what you can change, what business owners can change in their operations and in their systems. And from the people that run it to the systems they have, and I'm not talking electronic systems or digital systems, it's just the processes that they go through. How do they cut steps out? Can they cut steps out? Do they need to add to it? Do they need to make it better? All the things that we talked about thinking about, how am I going to occupy? How am I going to have people come to work or not? What opportunities do I have to be a much better place to work?
What I've been saying to clients, spend half your time on systems, right? Updating your systems. How do we propose work? How do we identify opportunities? The other half on hunting, right? And if you spend half your time hunting and half your time building systems, you're going to come out twice the company.
Absolutely.
Okay, Jess, listen, we've taken lots of your time. Thank you. And so what I normally wrangle people into, and if you would be open, is in the description below, I'm going to put some information on you and contact information if you're okay. And so if people have questions, maybe they can reach out to you, maybe by email or whatever, but I'll put that in the description below. Is that okay with you? Doesn't matter.
That's great. I'd love it.
I'm going to put it in anyway. So,
and so
thanks everybody for watching. We hope you enjoyed this. If you have questions, just in general, you can put them in the comments below, and we will see you in the next video. See you soon.